This is a video response to Epidemic 2020's A New Spin on the Moral Argument and the Is-Ought Gap. First off, let me say I really enjoyed the video, Epidemic. I love internet names. Thought-provoking, you seem to be a young kid, got a great head on your shoulders. Really appreciate the debate. And I just want to say that before we got into me disagreeing with you, because I'm coming from the atheist point of view. So anyway, let's get right down to the points. Premise 1, we cannot derive an ought from an is. I completely agree with that, and I would go a step further and say we cannot derive an is from an ought. I subjectively believe that I ought to be surrounded by beautiful women right now, but that does not make it true. Premise 2. If we are designed by God, we are created with a purpose, and there is a way we ought to function because we were created with a goal. Therefore, we have an objective goal / obligatory ought. Okay, and here you assume a lot. You say, if we're designed by God, then we were created with a purpose. How do you know that? Maybe we were created by accident. Maybe we were created on purpose, but without a goal. You have no way of knowing that. And at the end you conclude, therefore we have an obligatory ought. How do you know it's obligatory? We could have been created by an evil god with a goal that we don't agree with, which would make at best the goal to be objective. But for the purpose of this argument, I'm going to agree with your second premise. Premise 3, if we are not designed, then we exist without an objective goal. When I get to my counter-argument, I'll tell you why I feel that this statement is misleading, but I do not disagree that this is a true statement. Premise 4. Given premise 3, it follows that there would be no obligatory ought. Then we would have no purpose except the one that we arbitrarily assign to ourselves, making our ought subjective. All oughts would be derived through subjective value judgments. And other than what I would consider a somewhat misleading term in arbitrary, and I'll explain why in my counter-argument, I actually agree with this point. If all your goals are based on what you personally value, by definition they are a preference. No preference can be wrong or better than somebody else's preference. And again, on a meta level, I think this is an absolutely true statement. My counter-argument will definitely describe my disagreement with this statement. Premise 6. Whether or not it coincides with your goals, killing an innocent man solely for fun is wrong. So here's where you and I disagree. You say whether or not it coincides with your goals, killing an innocent man solely for fun is wrong. And while I personally, of course, agree with you, here's where we differ. It's in the definition of wrong. You're about to assert that because I would personally declare that wrong, that that's an obligatory ought, therefore the only source that could be God. Which I don't even necessarily say that is a logically flawed argument. Here is my counter-argument. Yes, I say that it's wrong, but it's my personal opinion. Morality is a product of consciousness. I think we can both agree with that. A lion killing a gazelle, Serengeti, is not an immoral act, it's amoral, because a lion, has a form of consciousness, lacks the ability to assess right and wrong. Just in the sense where a meteor crashing into the earth, killing the entire population, is not, even though it kills many innocent people, depending on your definition of innocent, it's not immoral, it's amoral, because the meteor lacks the ability to assess its actions. So if we agree that morality must be a product of consciousness, then there are really only two options, and I'm, just to oversimplify, either morality is a product of man, or morality is a product of something above man. You label it God, and it's fine, and we'll just call it God for now. So I'll leave it up to you which one of these two views seems to make more sense with what we observe with the world around you. View number 1, that there is an absolute moral truth because we are created with purpose, and these absolute moral truths are what you would consider obligatory oughts, things we must do because we are created that way. Or we evolve from lesser beings. We are instinctive. The primary instinct that we have is survival, making us selfish creatures by nature. So while we do primarily recognize that we need others to survive and adhere to certain tenets of not killing others, not stealing because they would have reprisals, we are also opportunistic and create and do many bad things. Okay, and here is my final problem, or my final disagreement. I think we've both put together we've each had our arguments. I don't think either one is more or less logically plausible. But let's say that I accept your argument. And the conclusion of your argument was, therefore, theism, it has the most logical explanation for morality. Okay, so what does that mean now? Now what theistic principles am I supposed to adopt? The problem is, with as much as I enjoy these logical proofs of God, they are useless. Absolutely, completely useless. Because it doesn't bring us any closer to the end of the argument. What you want to do is you want to tie in your ideology with the argument. And you can't do that. There is no logical... I mean, I'm assuming you're a Christian, but there's no logical proof of Jesus. And my contention would be, fine, even if you could prove beyond a shadow of doubt there is a God of some sort, you can't define him. And as soon as you start making proclamations in his name, start treating people differently because you think this is the way that God would want you to act, man, that's silly unless you can prove it. So in conclusion, if you remember your first premise that you cannot derive an ought from an is, and I said you can't derive an is from an ought, just because you think that there ought to be a higher moral authority doesn't mean there is one. And just because you think that there ought to be a God does not mean that there is. And I would never say that, I would never tell you what to believe. You're very free to believe whatever you want. But in the same sense, knowing that your ideology is arbitrary, I would hope that you have some sort of trepidation in applying that arbitrary ideology to others around you and, in a sense, the world around you. Epidemic 2020, you're a smart kid. I really appreciate your video. I'm actually going to subscribe. Look forward to more videos of yours. Have a great day.